Elizabeth Warren
does
didn't
matter
just
to you for knocking
question Scott
people off their
Bessent.
health care,
She
but not.
exposed
Well,
a
first of all,
moral
that
double
figure is
standard.
overstated by
Because when a
5.1
government
million.
says
That is
it
amount
can't
not
afford
attributable
healthcare,
to
but
provisions
can
in
So
afford
you
this
think
bill.
it's okay
tax
just
cuts
to
for billionaires, that's
million
not
people off their
economics.
health care?
That's
First of all,
ideology.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I want to ask about the Republican big, beautiful bill, which will knock about 16 million people off their health care coverage and cut programs that keep groceries cheaper for millions of families in order to try to pay for about $4 trillion in tax giveaways that are mostly going to be sucked up by millionaires, billionaires, and wealthy corporations. So, Mr. Bessent, Secretary Bessent, I'd like to start with a very simple question. Will this bill increase or decrease the deficit?
They're varying scoring on that, Senator Warren.
You're the Secretary of the Treasury, so I'm asking you, what is your view? Will this bill increase or decrease the deficit?
It is my view that over the 10-year window, it will decrease.
You know, do you have anybody who agrees with you on this?
Yes, ma'am.
Let me ask my question.
Okay.
Every credible independent expert agrees that Trump and the Republicans' big, beautiful bill would add trillions of dollars to the national debt and would not even come close to paying for itself. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, the Penn-Wharton budget model, and the Yale Budget Lab all agree on this, and they're looking at 10-year windows, thank you. So do the Conservative Tax Foundation and Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, conservative groups. Even Elon Musk and the Wall Street Journal are criticizing the bill for ballooning the national debt. The only people who are saying publicly that it's not going to add to the national debt are you, Donald Trump, the Republicans in Congress. Do you have an independent group that has put forward numbers that disagrees with all of these conservative groups and disagrees with the Wall Street Journal on this?
Well, Senator, interesting to see you aligned with Elon Musk, but if I add...
You're no more shocked than I am.
If we want to take the full congressional budget scoring, they predict, and I don't agree with their methodology, they predict a $2.4 trillion deficit. But
okay, so the answer to the question is yes.
No, but may I finish? They include that, but they've also scored $2.8 trillion in tariff income. So even in Washington, D.C. math,
okay, so,
in Washington, D.C. math, that is a $400 billion surplus.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand. This bill, you admit, will increase the deficit by $2.4 trillion, but you think there will be another bill and another set of agreements that somehow materialize, haven't materialized so far, don't have any statutory authority, but that will make up the difference. So the answer to the original question, will this bill increase or decrease the deficit? I think you just said it will increase. This bill increases the deficit.
No, I want to use all the CBO scoring, and you can't take one without the other. I don't agree with the CBO.
One is the law that we are scoring, the bill that is in front of us. We don't have a tariff bill in front of us to score. Mr. Secretary, let me go on to the second question. You have said that government spending is, quote, out of control. You have also called government spending, quote, unsustainable. In fact, in the name of fiscal responsibility, you're working with the Republicans on this big, beautiful bill to pass the biggest cuts to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act in American history. So, Mr. Secretary, help me understand here. Why is the national debt so very important that you're trying to kick 16 million people off their health insurance, but increasing the national debt doesn't seem to matter if you're cutting taxes for billionaires and billionaire corporations?
Well, first of all, a huge portion of this goes to family-owned businesses that are pass-through entities that are below that level, Senator, and I am sure you share my goals of Main Street prosperity.
You know, I'm glad to do tax cuts for people of modest means. The question I'm asking is, why does the deficit not matter to you? We're talking about knocking 16 million people off their health care, but it matters It does matter to you if we're knocking people off their health care, but not.
Well, first of all, that figure is overstated by 5.1 million. That is amount not attributable to provisions in this bill.
So you think it's okay just to knock 10 million people off their health care?
First of all, let's set that straight. Work requirements account for 8 million of CBO's claim number. Again, we're creating an economy that promotes and rewards.
It's clear, Secretary Bessent, that you don't want to answer the question.
No, Senator, I am answering it.
No, you're not.
And what I want is for Medicaid to be used for mothers and children as it was meant, not for 1.4 million illegal aliens, not for able-bodied people.
Medicaid is not used for people who are not documented. Mr. Chairman, I just want to say here, the part that troubles me the most is that the Secretary is deeply worried about the deficit and is willing to knock 16 million, or as he says, merely 11 million people off their health care. Matters so much. But it doesn't matter so much if you're cutting taxes for billionaires. Then it's okay to run up a big deficit. I think that's wrong.
We do have some differences of opinion. However, we also have a time crunch. I'm going to ask the remaining...
You could almost feel the tension humming in that hearing room the moment Senator Elizabeth Warren began her questioning. Her tone was calm, but beneath it was steel. She wasn't there to grandstand. She was there to expose a moral contradiction that has become the beating heart of conservative economics in America. Across from her sat Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, polished, polite, and visibly uncomfortable. He was there to defend the Republican Big Beautiful Bill, a sweeping package that promises economic growth, but in truth delivers a different kind of legacy, the largest transfer of wealth from working families to the ultra-rich in modern U.S. history. Warren started with what should have been a simple question, one that any Treasury Secretary should be able to answer without hesitation. Will this bill increase or decrease the deficit? Bessent dodged. He stuttered. He leaned on technicalities. And in that silence, Warren exposed what economists have been warning about for decades, the dangerous illusion that you can cut taxes for the rich, slash social programs for everyone else, and somehow call it fiscal responsibility. Because here's the truth that Warren understands and articulates better than almost anyone in American politics. Budgets aren't just numbers. Budgets are moral documents. They show, line by line, who a government values and who it's willing to sacrifice. What she did next was masterful. She methodically laid out the evidence, not partisan spin, but data. The Congressional Budget Office, the Penn-Wharton Budget Model, the Yale Budget Lab, even the Wall Street Journal. All of them agree that this so-called Big Beautiful Bill would explode the national deficit by trillions of dollars. So when Bessent claimed that over time the bill would somehow reduce the deficit, Warren did what every great investigator does. She held up the mirror of reality and forced him to look at his own reflection. Because not even conservative economists, the same ones who normally cheerlead tax cuts, were willing to back that math. Not even Elon Musk, a man who's made billions off deregulation and tax breaks, could defend it. And that's when Warren shifted gears, from economics to ethics. She asked the question that cuts to the soul of American policymaking. Why is it that the deficit only matters when it's about healthcare or food for working families, but it suddenly doesn't matter when it's about tax cuts for billionaires? That single question peeled back the moral hypocrisy of Washington. It's not that Republicans hate debt. They love it when it serves their donors. It's that they've redefined fiscal responsibility to mean punishing the poor while rewarding the rich. Under this so-called Big Beautiful Bill, 16 million Americans would lose their health coverage. 16 million. That's not a rounding error. That's entire communities left to fend for themselves. Mothers forced to choose between medicine and rent. Children losing access to care they need to grow and survive. And when Bessent tried to dismiss those numbers, Warren didn't let him off the hook. She reminded him that even his own estimates admitted millions would lose coverage. He wanted to talk about efficiency. She wanted to talk about human beings. Because this isn't just about policy differences, it's about moral priorities. The same administration that calls Medicaid unsustainable somehow finds endless funds for corporate tax cuts, defense contractors, and subsidies for industries already swimming in profit. They'll tell you it's about trickle-down economics, but what trickles down isn't prosperity, it's pain. What Warren illuminated in that moment is the fundamental lie of modern conservative economics, that the wealth of a few somehow justifies the suffering of many. That cutting off a working mother's healthcare is responsible, but handing a billionaire a tax break is growth. It's not just wrong, it's backwards. Because every dollar ripped from Medicaid or food aid doesn't disappear into thin air, it's transferred upward. The wealth gap widens, and the illusion of a booming economy is built on the backs of those who can least afford it. Warren has always been at her most powerful when she exposes the connection between morality and money, and this hearing was no exception. She turned dry fiscal jargon into something urgent, emotional, and undeniably human. When she said, "If you can justify running up the deficit for billionaires, you can afford to protect healthcare for working families," she wasn't just making a political point. She was reminding America that compassion and competence are not opposites, they're inseparable. What made this exchange extraordinary wasn't just her command of facts, it was her insistence that numbers must never replace people. Warren understands that a healthy democracy isn't measured by how much wealth it accumulates at the top, but by how much security it provides at the bottom. And that's why she refused to let Bessent's evasions stand. Because behind every statistic is a story, a family that can't afford a doctor's visit, a senior rationing insulin, a parent losing coverage in the middle of chemotherapy. Those are the real costs of the big, beautiful bill. This hearing wasn't about political theater, it was about moral truth. Elizabeth Warren did what too few politicians have the courage to do. She connected the dots between economic policy and human pain, and in doing so, she forced the room, and the nation, to confront an uncomfortable truth. The greatest deficit in Washington isn't fiscal, it's moral. So as we watch this debate unfold, the question isn't just about what gets cut or who gets taxed. It's about what kind of country we want to be. Do we measure success by the size of a billionaire's tax break, or by the number of families who can sleep at night knowing they're covered if they get sick? Elizabeth Warren reminded us that empathy is not an expense, it's an investment in people, in community, in democracy itself. Because the strength of this country has never come from the wealthiest at the top. It's come from the millions who keep it running, the teachers, nurses, construction workers, parents, and small business owners who ask for little more than fairness. And fairness is what this fight is really about. If you take one thing from this exchange, let it be this. When politicians tell you that compassion costs too much, ask them who benefits when it's cut. Because the math of morality is simple. If a policy doesn't work for ordinary people, it doesn't work. Stay informed, stay curious, and stay human, because democracy only works when we refuse to accept cruelty disguised as economics.